So I am going to take a stab at my individual oral. Today I'll be talking about the stereotypes of the working class father and how they tend to be depicted as this ambiguous yet simultaneous addicted and lovable person within the family. So I'll be looking at an episode of The Simpsons. It's entitled Duffless. And Duff is the name of the beer that Homer Simpson frequently drinks, and there's Duff Brewery in their community. I'll be comparing this episode and specifically the role of Homer Simpson to the father in Theodore Roethke's poem, My Papa's Waltz, and be sort of comparing and contrasting, again, the ambiguities that are present in the working class home. It serves to explore the stereotypes of the working class male, particularly the father, who's often portrayed as flawed in some way, and typically this flaw is by way of addiction. The father, while having this addiction, is still often very revered and loved, not simply for his hard work, but he seems to genuinely love his family. And so this love of family is often in contrast and has a dissonance to the father's sort of self-harm. So we're going to take a first look at Roethke's poem. So in Roethke's poem, My Papa's Waltz, our speaker is an adult and looking back on their childhood, thinking of his father, and the reader's left trying to determine whether the child loves his father or fears his father when he is under the influence of alcohol. And the poem opens with the indication, of course, that the father has been drinking. And it says, "The whiskey on your breath could make a small boy dizzy, but I hung on like death. Such waltzing was not easy." So, again, right away, we know the father has been drinking. We don't know how much, but the breath itself is making the boy dizzy, is making him nauseous. He's feeling ill. So right away, we're not left feeling very pleasant. And we have this simile that pops in of the boy hanging on like death. And, of course, it doesn't get any more sort of dark than death. And this boy is hanging on, and we're not, again, totally clear if this is a good hanging on because he likes it, or if this is disturbing, right, for the child. As he says, such waltzing is not easy. The title itself, My Papa's Waltz, I mean, it just sort of... Papa has this, we think father, we all have a father in some way, shape, or form, and, there's this indicator of love just laden in the term Papa, and then waltz, of course, is this dance. But while there's this seemingly pleasant memory, there are some dissonant sounds. The rhyming scheme utilizes assonance in which the rhyming words are not completely identical, such as dizzy and easy, as we just were discussing. And these slight imperfections reflect the speaker's feelings toward his father, perhaps because while he has this unconditional love for his father, there are some imperfections apparently with his father. So we have this space of father sort of ambiguous, right? We want to love our father even though our father might have a problem, whatever that problem may be, and in this case, apparently it is the father's drinking. So we go on and we understand the poem. The reader is left to imagine a small boy who's spinning in a literal and metaphorical waltz. And we know this may be unpleasant, as to feel dizzy can often feel pretty nauseous, and we're told the father has alcohol in his breath very specifically. It is safe to assume the father has been drinking and is likely even drunk, hence the waltz sort of reference. Further lyrics, or lines rather, suggest more ambiguity, deliberate, very, very precise on Rothke's part, ambiguity when he writes, "We romped until the pans slid from the kitchen shelf. My mother's countenance could not unfrown itself." So word choice like romped, right, again, has this ambiguity that speaks to a bit of the discussion I'm aiming at, which is romped can be something of that is clumsy, but it could also be something that is highly playful, like boy and father are roughhousing, right, which is sort of this idyllic sort of space for the male relationships of father-son. And mother could just be frowning for the fact that, oh, here they go again, sort of notion. On the other hand, of course, it could be that mother doesn't like her pans spilling all about the kitchen, and she knows she's going to be the one who has to clean up. Lines 5 through 6 continue the waltz and even may be fun, as Rothke says. They romped until pans slid on the shelf, so much so that mother is irritated, and it could just be drunk father making a mess and creating chaos for the family. We learn further that the father's hand is battered on one knuckle, which may mean he was in a fight, but it could also mean that the father just works with his hands in more of a working class field, and that it's just harmless and that this is a hardworking man. It is possible the father has simply stopped for a drink after a hard day at work. But again, it's just the continued ambiguity that Rothke inserts to have us examine this father and this father-son relationship. Further lines continue where he says, "You beat time on my head with a palm caked hard by dirt, then waltz me off to bed, still clinging to your shirt." So again, the rhyme scheme is evident and playful, yet the lines in the poem itself, again, have this discord where, again, he uses the word "beat time on my head," and we know that the waltz is a measured dance. There's meter involved, and so beating time would fit in, and perhaps that is the harmlessness in which he means. But beaten also, of course, it's laden with the notion of abuse or something physically harmful. And his palm, we understand, the father's palm that the son can feel, is caked hard by dirt. Again, it's not clear if it's hard and hurts the child, or if he senses it and seems to appreciate or know that the father is been working very hard in something, again, that is more of manual labor. And the father waltzes him off to bed could be very simply an image of a child being carried off to bed with the child still clinging to his shirt. And the child could be clinging because he does not want to let go, but he could also be clinging in fear. So we have this perpetual ambiguity that Rothke, again, very precisely sets up for us as we try and discern the father's role. And clearly the father is, under the influence of alcohol, and yet the child seems to love the father regardless of the father's potential or perceived problem. So, much the same way that the father in My Papa's Waltz is a seemingly hardworking father who is the income earner in the home and comes home and maybe has a beverage or two after work, and then plays with his child, whether it be perceived as negatively or positively. He does have some sort of dance. We have Homer Simpson, who is likely a little bit more of a household name to many, as a father figure in a working class home, who is also the breadwinner for the family, an important role that men in most cultures kind of get to have. I say get to have for the fact that it is a space of privilege to be the breadwinner, it's also a space of responsibility, of course. So Homer Simpson is more explicitly defined by his creator, and we know through assorted episodes that Homer works in a factory, has 3 kids and a wife, and lives in suburbia called Springfield. So through collective episodes, we learn this. We're going to focus on one episode in particular, however. But we nonetheless have much more information about Homer than we do about the Papa in the poem that we were just discussing. Still, like the father in My Papa's Waltz, Homer is a tad ambiguous, right? We love Homer, but he surely finds himself making continuous errors with his aloofness and alcoholism. In the episode Duffless, Homer decides to stop off at a brewery before work, as opposed to Rothke's character who stops by a place to drink after work. Homer decides to go before work to sample some new beers with his friend Barney. Homer has a great time and tells lots of jokes to which the audience laugh. And so here we are as viewers laughing along with Homer, knowing, of course, that he is doing something he shouldn't really be doing because he's supposed to be going to work, but he's drinking instead. And, we often laugh at Homer's odd behavioral choices. After multiple samples of beer, he leaves and gets into his car and is pulled over by the police and is given a ticket for drinking and driving. He goes to jail. And his wife, Marge, who is always devoted and loyal to Homer, gets notice that her husband has been arrested, and she is notably disappointed. She brings him home, and she asks him to quit drinking for a month in this episode. And she starts to become concerned that her husband has a drinking problem. She asks him several questions to which he and we, as again, the audience member, are taken along, just like we're taken along in Rothke's poem. We are taken along and we're laughing along with Homer at his responses to Marge's very serious questions. So again, this sort of ambiguity. She has some very serious concern for his alcoholism, as she should have. I mean, he's just missed work to go drink and has been pulled over. And yet we are laughing, right? So we have this strange contrast ourselves as the viewer, and the writers have deliberately created. Marge asks, "Homie, do you ever drink alone?" And Homer's response is, "Does the Lord count as a person?" And of course, we laugh along. And then she asks, "Do you need beer to fall asleep?" He responds, "Thank you, that would be nice." Again, we laugh because we realize he's kind of aloof, and he's not the brightest bulb sometimes. And we think that's kind of funny. Yet, of course, there's a problem in that, right? She asks, "Do you ever hide beer around the house?" He responds, "Do I ever?" And he pops open a can of beer, of which he finds in the side couch panel. The other question is, "Do you ever drink to escape from reality?" And he starts humming, and we see his thought bubble, and there's a can dance group. So again, some very serious contrasts in emotion, right? We have the genuine concern of a doting wife who is mother to their 3 kids, that she's concerned about her husband's drinking. It could, of course, impact their family structure, their ability to pay for their home, his health, and their relationships, right? But of course, we are laughing along because Homer is still very lovable. He's still very likable because he's not, he's not a physically abusive drunk. He's just not concentrating often. So we get the point. Homer has a problem and even is put into mandatory AA meeting. He has, because of his DUI, he shrieks when the group offers to help him stop drinking. Homer's flawed by his alcoholism, yet we can still at times find him very likable, much, again, of course, like Papa in Rothke's poem. In the same episode, Homer is a very hands-on dad, as the sort of side story that is going on within the episode has Bart and Lisa, 2 of his children, working on science projects for school. And Homer, of course, is so caught up in his own issues and his withdrawal from alcohol that he can't understand their science projects. He's having cognitive trouble understanding. And again, we find ourselves laughing at Homer's ignorance. Yet at the same time, it's clear that the kids are of need and maybe want of their father's understanding and perhaps even admiration. So as we wrap up, we can see very clearly that there is a normalization in whether it be alcoholism or any other substance abuse or any other addiction or flawed behavior in our working male families, particularly the father, the breadwinning father of our families. He may have issues. In the case of Rothke's Papa and Homer Simpson, it is, of course, of alcohol, but they are still contributors to their family, and above all, perhaps, they are contributors to the patriarchal economic systems that run the vast number